April 2025 will go down as the month Britain realized that Brexit and Trump are still very much a package deal, and that neither comes without a hefty price tag. Gross domestic product in the UK shrank by 0.3% in that month alone, the sharpest monthly decline since October 2023, and the consequences didn't just hit some obscure data sheet in the Treasury's basement. They rattled shop floors, export businesses, and crucially, the public mood. While the government tried to blame the end of a homebuyer tax break for the hit to the services sector, the truth was a little harder to hide. President Donald Trump's April tariff storm sent British goods exports to the United States into freefall. The drop was a staggering £2 billion in just 1 month. That's a 33% crash from March, the sharpest monthly fall since records began in 1997. So much for the special relationship, and so much for the fabled Brexit trade freedom. Rachel Reeves, the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, tried to offer a calm explanation, calling April a challenging month and pointing to the economic uncertainty surrounding tariffs. But no amount of diplomatic phrasing can gloss over the fact that Britain's largest single export market just slammed the brakes, and the UK is still fumbling with the emergency lights, second largest, by the way. But let's rewind to the source. On April 2nd, Donald Trump, in true Trumpian fashion, decided the world needed a lesson in economic nationalism. He rolled out a set of new tariffs, including a 10% blanket levy on all goods entering the United States, and a menu of sector-specific hikes that would make any trade negotiator reach for the whiskey. Steel and aluminum imports, up. Car imports, up. And even the British goods that had been previously exempt found themselves facing new fiscal walls. Yes, Britain did manage to strike a framework deal with Washington to soften some of the impact. Well, they were in fact the only country to do so until then, but that deal is like an unopened umbrella in a monsoon. The tariffs are here and the relief package remains trapped in the slow churn of implementation. And the result? British car makers, steel producers and supply chain firms are all taking blows to the ribs, just as they were beginning to find their post-Brexit footing. And here's the kicker. The Bank of England had predicted that the long-term effect of these tariffs would be modest, maybe shaving 0.3% of growth in 3 years. Instead, they've just burned through that in a single month. If this is modest, I'd hate to see significant. Manufacturers had rushed to ship goods in March ahead of the tariff hike, a classic case of playing chicken with economic policy. But April came, and with it, a harsh new reality. Exports were down 15% year on year. Thousands of UK exporters are now facing lower orders, ballooning costs, and disrupted customer relations. William Bain of the British Chambers of Commerce put it plainly. The economic effects of US tariffs are no longer theoretical, they are operational. And it's not just a trade statistics issue. Britain's global goods trade deficit ballooned to £23.2 billion in April, up from £19.9 billion in March. And that's the widest it's been since January 2022. And while the UK's surplus in services helps narrow the overall trade gap, the underlying message is clear. They are bleeding value on goods exports, and it's not a slow drip, it's a rupture. And even the IMF has started murmuring about Britain's declining resilience in global trade. And Germany, by the way, saw a 10.5% dip in its exports to the US during the same month, but at least their numbers are seasonally adjusted and their internal trade buffers are much stronger. And Britain doesn't have that luxury. You are running on a tighter engine. And you are now paying the price of trusting in a White House that treats international trade policy like an episode of The Apprentice. And perhaps the most damning part of all of this is the contrast between promise and reality. I talked about this last week. Boris Johnson and the pro-Brexit lobby has sold a vision of a nimble, independent Britain, striking deals around the globe, starting with a lucrative pact with the United States. Well, the UK exported £59.3 billion in goods to the US last year. In April, it managed just 4.2 billion. That isn't global Britain, that's shrinking Britain. And even though Downing Street has said that tariffs on steel, aluminum and cars will be lifted under the New Deal, we are still waiting for signatures, timelines and, crucially, relief. And meanwhile, exporters are paying tariffs, customers are paying higher prices, and economic momentum is stalling. In a twist of tragic irony, Trump's tariffs hit hardest just as UK firms were already struggling with the lingering complications of Brexit, rules of origin barriers, customs paperwork, driver shortages, and more. And now they have to contend with a trade partner whose economic moves can reverse a quarter's growth in a matter of weeks. And here's something for the long view. These are not just temporary headwinds. According to KPMG's Giles Selfin, even if some certainty has been injected into the policy pipeline, tariffs remain higher than pre-April levels. That means ongoing costs, declining competitiveness, and a chilling effect on future investment. Companies can't play in fog. They need sunlight. And right now, the only thing raining down is confusion. To add further weight to the crisis, British manufacturers, especially in sectors like automotive and advanced engineering, rely heavily on integrated transatlantic supply chains. Those chains don't cope well with sudden surges in costs or ambiguous policy timelines. If you're building electric vehicles in the Midlands and sourcing key components from multiple countries, a 10% tariff isn't just a nuisance. It's an existential threat. Several firms, including Jaguar Land Rover, paused shipments and are now renegotiating delivery terms with US customers. And while a refund on tariffs paid since May 8th might be in the works, it's not guaranteed. And firms don't live on hope. They live on margins. So what happens next? The UK will likely keep pushing the US to fast-track the implementation of the agreed tariff removals, but there's little incentive on Trump's end to rush anything. He plays by his own rules, and if political optics require another round of tariff theater in July, Britain might find itself back in the line of fire. And the tragedy here is layered. First, that Brexit left the UK vulnerable. Second, that Trump exploited that vulnerability. And third, that there seems to be no coherent counter-strategy from Whitehall beyond the usual diplomatic footwork and bland assurances. April was bad, and May hasn't been much better. And if the current trends hold, 2025 may be remembered not as the year of recovery, but the year Britain realized that global Britain is still at the mercy of foreign agendas. So next time you hear politicians say you're turning the corner, check which direction the traffic is coming from. Because when the economy stalls, it's rarely the guy on the corner with the flag who gets crushed first. It's the people in the vehicle. And Britain at this point feels like it's riding in the back of a car it no longer controls. Trump has his hands on the wheel, and Brexit threw the map out of the window. And stay tuned, because it looks like the next turn might even be sharper.